ISIS issuing their ultimatum to Christians in Iraq: convert to Islam, pay a fine, or face death by the sword. That means beheading. Fox News correspondent Greg Palcott just spoke with the Archbishop of Erbil, Iraq, and Greg joins us live from Erbil. Greg.
Warda of the Chaldean Catholic Church is a man with his hands full. His church runs 25 refugee centers in Erbil alone, and so he sees and hears firsthand the horrors that are perpetrated on Christians by ISIS in Iraq. Here are a few of the observations he shared with me, a warning they are not too hopeful.
Practically speaking, realistically speaking, is the end of the Christianity. I have to say. We will stay. Yes, they would be Christians staying, but we would be like an article in a history book. Most of them would like to go back to prepare their papers and leave the country.
And leave?
Leave the country. Others,
no hope?
No way. Some people would ask us, do you like to stay? And I usually turn the question and ask them, do you like us to stay? It's not. It's not that we don't like to stay, but it depends on you if you like me to stay.
A key point that Warda made to me is this: it is not just the hundreds or thousands of ISIS militants causing horrors against the Christians. It is the anti-Christian fever that is incited in many, many more in Iraq. It could be neighbors of the Christians who are also capable of robbing and attacking. And that is why he says many, many of these people do not want to go back home. Greta.
Greg, thank you. And a short time ago, the United Nations acting unanimously endorsing a resolution calling for sanctions against those who finance or give military support to ISIS. So that's the UN. But what should the Obama administration be doing to help Christians around the world? Joining us, Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North and former UN Ambassador John Bolton. Good evening to both of you. First to you, Colonel North, with the number of ISIS growing, and it's terrific that we're giving humanitarian aid, but if they're growing in number and gaining ground and they have a ton of money, are we going to be giving humanitarian aid forever? Don't we have to get ISIS?
Well, first of all, that United Nations resolution that says other countries don't have to aid ISIS. ISIS has got their own. It's the wealthiest terrorist organization on the planet, and they generate about $1 million in revenue a day from the black market. The only way to deal with ISIS isn't by dropping supplies and water and food to humanitarian relief efforts. We've got to start dropping bombs on ISIS. And we've got to do that at their command and control nodes, their logistics support centers, the places where they gather, and we know where they are. I mean, one of the good things that we've got in our intelligence services is the ability to detect that. And it can't just be in Iraq. It also has to be in Syria.
Ambassador, you've told us that President Obama doesn't understand religion or religious fanaticism. That's what you told us. And I'm curious, it's not just ISIS in Iraq. I mean, we've got Boko Haram doing the most unthinkable thing with schoolgirls. They just recently killed 100 people in the last few days, slit their throats while they're saying God is great. I mean, it is many places. What are we supposed to do?
Well,
if we're supposed to do anything.
I think the president's really got to confront the reality that we see ISIS perpetrating in Syria and Iraq and these other extremists around the world. I think the president suffers from a fundamental defect shared by many in American academia and on the political side, that he doesn't see that these religious fanaticisms can arise from something other than poverty, that it's not an economically based problem. It's an ideological problem. We're in an ideological struggle against a radicalized form of Islam. And I think in the case of ISIS, the one that confronts us immediately, we need a presidential decision that the United States has to lead a coalition to destroy ISIS. We cannot let it hold territory, because it's only a short matter of time before ISIS attacks not Christians and Yazidis in Iraq, but in the United States.
But in looking at the whole sort of persecution of Christians that we've been looking at here on the Record for the last few nights, is there any indication, either one of you, that it is declining, or is this growing?
No, quite the contrary. It's obviously growing. And you wonder what it will take to get the president to understand this. We now have not just a resolution, we have 2 UN Secretary General special representatives issuing a statement today saying 1,500 Christians and Yazidis have been sold into sexual slavery in Iraq. So I wonder what the president is going to do to tell us that this is barbarianism in action.
You know, Colonel, you said something the other night that I thought was chilling when we were talking about, you know, what the terrible things that happened in the 30s and the 40s in the Holocaust, is that it was stunning to me when you said, you know, a lot of people say they didn't know about it, and you say that you point about that we do now know about this.
We can't deny
it puts us in a completely different situation.
Well, it does. The moral responsibility that I have is to my children and my grandchildren. And I don't want to have to turn to my children and try to pretend we didn't know. This is up on the internet. It's all over the place. They revel in their culture of death. There's not been something like this in your lifetime and mine. Perhaps in Genghis Khan, but not in our lifetimes. And our responsibility is to hold our government accountable, not just to a single humanitarian disaster of Yazidis and Christians in Iraq, but a global attack on not just Christianity, a global attack on Jews. Think about it. The only place in the Middle East today where a Christian is safe is Israel.
Well, there are Muslims that are even being persecuted in Sudan. I mean, it's not. I mean,
they're equal opportunity killers, and that's part of the problem. I think is that it's such a pervasive threat that people don't want to see it in its totality. So if you look at it country by country, it doesn't look like we have a responsibility. But I think we do for our own safety's sake, if nothing else.
Well, if the numbers were declining, it would be easier. I mean, it's like the humanitarian thing is really tough to look at. I mean, the beheadings and the viciousness and people. I've seen people starving to death, eating bugs and leaves. I mean, it's very tough. But the problem is, it's growing.
Well, this refugee crisis in particular is not over. Maybe not on Mount Sinjar, but you still have hundreds of thousands of people not in their homes. And the notion that we can just turn away from it, I think, violates the responsibility we have in Iraq in particular, given what we've done and what we tried to do for that country. And yet the president doesn't seem to want to address it.
Gentlemen.
It's not too late to reach out to the disaffected Sunni seculars in Anbar province. I spent an awful lot of time broadcasting with you from there, and they're still our friends. They're just afraid that we're going to bug out on them again.
Yeah. Gentlemen, thank you both very much.